Rough hands clamped around Erin's wrists like iron vines, yanking her from the soil where she'd been kneeling, fingers deep in the damp earth of her border grove. The elven guard's armor gleamed under the fractured moonlight, their faces masks of indifferent duty as they bound her with silken cords that bit into her skin. "Tribute for the Sylvan court," one growled, his breath hot against her ear. "Your herbs won't save you now." She twisted, heart slamming against her ribs, tasting blood where her lips split against a guard's gauntlet. No, not like this. Not sold again, pawned off like her mother had done 12 years back, traded for a sack of grain and a promise of peace. Erin stomped down on an instep, eliciting a curse, but they only laughed, low and predatory, hauling her toward the waiting caravan of thorn-wreathed wagons. Her satchel of dried roots and poultices swung wildly from her shoulder until a blade severed the strap. She lunged for it, her only weapons, her only self, but a knee drove into her gut, folding her double. The journey blurred into jolts of pain, wheels crunching over root-tangled paths, the guard's murmurs of court intrigues she half heard through nausea. By dawn, the sylvan heartlands rose around them, towering trees woven into spires, leaves shimmering like living emeralds, air thick with the scent of immortal sap and something sharper, metallic. Blood. Her healer's nose caught it first, underlaid with decay. They dumped her at the palace gates, a sprawl of arched stone and blooming nightshade where courtiers in silks parted like mist. "The human tribute," a steward proclaimed, voice oily, "for the king's gardens." Erin pushed to her feet, spitting dirt, her simple woolen shift torn and mudded. Comforts. They offered a velvet cloak, a goblet of wine-laced water. She shoved them away. "I'll work," she rasped, voice steady despite the tremor in her knees. "Not preen like some trophy. Give me dirt to turn, plants to tend. That's my use." The steward's eyes narrowed, but he waved her through, into the outer gardens where lesser servants scattered. Exhaustion clawed at her, but Erin refused the marble alcoves, the perfumed palettes. Instead, she found a hollow beneath an ancient willow, its roots curling like protective arms. She curled there too, back to the bark, one hand clutching a stolen sprig of feverfew from her belt, her last link to the grove. Sleep came fitful, dreams of her mother's retreating shadow, the fear coiling tight, owned again, used up, discarded. From the shadowed eaves of the palace, King Thar watched. His vantage was high, a balcony carved into the living wood of the crown tree, where the court's whispers rarely reached. Centuries had honed his gaze to a blade, discerning threat from trifle in a glance. This human, though. She moved like no tribute before, not cowering, not simpering. She'd spurned the silks, bedded down with the roots as if they were kin. He leaned forward, pale fingers gripping the rail, the faint ache of hunger stirring in his veins, not for blood, not yet, but for something sharper. Connection. The court saw him as eternal, unyielding. They were right, but the weight pressed heavier each decade. Loneliness, a shadow he'd starved rather than fed. Her defiance flickered like a candle in that gloom. Intriguing, dangerous. "Bring her to the inner gardens," he murmured to the shadow at his elbow, his seneschal materializing without sound. "Under observation, no rituals yet." The seneschal bowed, vanishing into the mist. Alien's eyes lingered on her sleeping form, the rise and fall of her chest, the mud-streaked defiance even in repose. What wound drove her there to the dirt? He turned away, the decision settling like frost. Keep her close. Watch what fractures she might cause. Morning light pierced the canopy as Erin was roused by booted feet. Guards again, this time courteous in their roughness, escorting her past iron-van gates into the inner sanctum. Here the gardens breathed power, blossoms that glowed faintly, vines pulsing with faint heartbeats, air humming with latent magic. Courtiers lined the paths, their elongated ears and luminous eyes fixed on her, judging, whispering. The steward awaited at the central pavilion, a dais of polished obsidian flanked by throne-like seats. "Kneel, tribute. Accept your court name, Laurel of the petals, servant to the crown. Aaron planted her feet, chin lifting. The air thickened, eyes boring into her like thorns. Kneel, become Laurel, a pretty label for property. Her pulse thundered, mother's voice echoing, asterisk your mind to give. No. Aaron, she said flatly, that's my name, and I'm no servant to silks. Point me to the royal herbs. I'll earn my keep healing what's broken. Gasps rippled. A lady's fan snapped shut. A lord's hand twitched toward his dagger. Protocol shattered, tributes knelt, names were remade, wills bent. Dangerous, the whispers agreed. Aaron's skin prickled, isolation closing in, but she held, fists clenched at her sides. Better alone than owned. From his veiled throne, Alien observed, the stir like a pebble in still water. Her bluntness cut through the court's perfume, raw as fresh soil. Intriguing deepened to compulsion. She challenged without weapons, exposed the fragility of traditions he'd enforced for ages. His own control felt the echo, absolute yet hollow. Then a small hand slipped into hers. Aaron startled, glancing down. A boy, no older than 10, half-elven by his delicate features and shadowed eyes. Jory, the hollow prince, the court's mute ward, rumors called him a living emblem, paraded then ignored. His fingers were cold, scarred from daily lessons in etiquette, fresh welts blooming on his knuckles. He looked up, silent plea in his wide eyes, thumb tracing her palm. Attachment? Aaron's chest tightened, fear surged, the old scar ripping open. Caring meant loss, she'd learned that when her mother walked away. Pull back, her instinct screamed. But his gaze held no demand, only quiet need. She exhaled, squeezing back gently. "Show me your hands," she murmured, kneeling despite the steward's glare. In the pavilion's edge, away from prying eyes, she unpacked her stolen herbs, crushing yarrow and comfrey into a paste. Jory watched, unblinking, as she smoothed it over his wounds, the cool salve drawing a faint shiver from him. Her own hands trembled. Why this? Why risk the pull? Because he was small, discarded like her once. Because healing mended something in her too, even if it terrified her. The steward cleared his throat, stepping forward as courtiers murmured louder. "My liege observes, but protocol demands the blood claim. A drop of her essence, bound to the crown's chalice. She becomes property eternal, useful for the gardens, the king's needs." Aaron's blood chilled. Blood claim. She'd heard whispers in the grove, vampires' rights twisting mortals into thralls, consent a forgotten word. Jory's hand tightened in hers. She felt his fear mirror her own. Alien rose then, his presence unfolding like nightfall. Tall, ethereal, skin like moonlit marble, eyes black as void yet flickering with restrained storm. The court hushed, air thickening with his power. Hunger gnawed at him, her scent, human vitality laced with resolve, teased the edges of his control. But consent, his line carved from centuries of guilt, the lovers he drained in rages of isolation. "No. Enough," he said, voice low thunder, ambiguous as mist. "Keep her close, in the inner gardens, under my eye." The steward faltered. "But the ritual?" "Close," Alien repeated, gaze locking on Aaron. She met it, unflinching, Jory half hidden behind her skirts. The command hung, neither mercy nor possession, yet it bound her nearer the heart of power, the court's schemes sharpening like fangs. Aaron swallowed, pulse racing. Close to him, the king whose loneliness she sensed like a shadow under his crown. Jory pressed against her leg, a fragile anchor. She'd work, survive, but this, his watchful eyes promised fractures she wasn't ready to face. Still, she nodded once, defiant spark unquenched. "Not property, not yet." Alien turned away first, but the ache deepened. Her nearness was a risk to protocol, to his court, to the hunger he'd caged so long. And yet, he couldn't look away. Alien's fingers tightened on the arm of his throne, the carved roots of ancient oak biting into his palm like a warning. He could still feel the warmth of her skin from moments ago, a ghost pulse against his hunger, and the court watched, expectant. "The human healer Aaron Vell," he said, voice cutting the vaulted hall like frost on glass. She will tend the royal groves henceforth, at night, under my personal oversight. The steward bowed low, eyes flickering with unspoken questions, but Alien dismissed him with a glance. Whispers rippled outward, insolence, they would call it later, tethering a tribute so visibly to the king's shadow. But the ache demanded it. Her refusal earlier, that unyielding spine amid the garden's silvered leaves, had cracked something in him. He needed her close, not caged, but near enough to test if his control held. Aaron knelt in the undercroft beneath the groves, mud caking her knees as she sorted nightshade roots by lamplight. The air hung heavy with damp earth and the sharp tang of crushed herbs, a scent that grounded her when the court's endless eyes did not. Lady Alowen, one of the highborn with skin like polished ivory and a smile that never reached her eyes, stood over her, fan fluttering like a trapped moth. "You forget your place, girl," Alowen said, voice honeyed venom. "Tributes serve. The blood law binds you, your veins, your skills, all forfeit to the crown's need. Refuse a noble's request for tonic or vein and it's the pits for you. Or worse." Aaron didn't look up, her hand steady as she bruised a leaf between fingers, releasing its bitter oil. The words landed like stones she'd long learned to step around, ownership dressed as tradition, just like her mother's bargain at the border grove. "If refusing means I keep my hands free for real work, then fine," she said flatly. "Poisons and flattery won't heal a fever. Send me the sick, not the schemers." Alowen's fan snapped shut. "Insolent cur. The king indulges you for now, but we'll see how your tongue fares when the law calls for blood." She swept away, skirts whispering over stone, leaving Aaron alone with the echo of quiet laughter from shadowed alcoves. Reputation spread like root rot, the human who spoke plain truths, earning scorn that clung like dew. That night the groves waited under a sickle moon, their branches woven into impossible arches that blocked the stars. Aaron moved through them with a lantern hooked to her belt, the light carving gold pools amid endless green-black. Her breath fogged in the chill, each step crunching frost-rimed moss. She felt him before she saw him, that weight in the air, like the hush before a storm. King Alien perched on a root throne at the grove's heart, his form half lost in shadow, eyes gleaming amber in the low light. He didn't speak as she approached, only watched, unblinking, as she knelt to inspect the silverleaf vines. Their tendrils pulsed faintly, veins of moonlight trapped in sap. Proximity clawed at her, his scent of pine resin and old blood, the way his presence pulled at her pulse like a tide. "You're testing me," she said finally, not raising her eyes from the vine she pruned. Snip. A leaf fell, iridescent. "Night work suits the groves, they bloom under moon, but you know that." A low hum escaped him, not quite laughter, "and you refuse to fear." His voice wrapped around her, velvet over steel. She glanced up then, meeting his gaze, and felt the pull sharper, hunger in those depths, caged but vast. Her hands faltered for a heartbeat, remembering her mother's face vanishing into the mist, sold for a sack of grain. No, she wouldn't be owned again. "I fear wasting time," she replied, tying off a vine with steady fingers. "These need misting, not staring." He didn't move, but the air thickened, his silence a pressure that made her skin prickle. Night after night it repeated, her tending, his watching. Close enough to touch, far enough to deny. The tribunal came 3 nights later, the great hall thrumming with silk-robed nobles under chandeliers of captured fireflies. Aaron stood at the edge, summoned as witness to a border dispute, a human village accused of withholding tribute blood. Jory huddled beside her, the hollow prince, his half-elven frame slight and silent, wide eyes darting like a cornered fawn. He clutched her sleeve, mute as ever, his fear a tangible chill. Alien loomed on his dais, crown of thorned silver casting jagged shadows. The petitioner, Lord Varin, droned on, "The blood law is eternal. Their veins fuel our strength. Refusal is treason." Aaron's jaw tightened. She'd seen the village's children, hollow-cheeked from the packs that drained them yearly. Jory's grip spasmed on her arm, He knew that hollowness, discarded symbol of a failed alliance. When silence fell for testimony, she stepped forward before she could stop herself. "It's not strength," she said, voice carrying clear over the hush. "It's theft. Drain a body too long and it withers. I've seen it, folks turn to husks, no good to anyone. Change the law or lose more than blood." Gasps rippled, fans rising like shields. Lord Varin sputtered. "A tribute dares." Alien's hand rose, silencing them. His eyes locked on hers and a thin smile ghosted his lips. Approval, amusement, danger. Whispers erupted. Insolence incarnate, the human who challenged eternity. Jory trembled beside her, but she held her ground, heart pounding against the weight of all those eyes. After, in the corridor's dim alcove, away from the throng, Aaron knelt to Jory's level. He was shaking, fists knotted in his cloak. She fished the silver leaf brooch from her pocket, carved that afternoon from grove scrap, its edges sharp as a promise. "Here," she murmured, pinning it to his collar. The metal caught the torchlight, cool against his skin. "Wear it when you're scared, means you're not alone. Not discarded." His eyes widened, fingers brushing the leaf, then her hand. No words but a nod, fierce and trusting, a vow sealed in silence. The ceremonial table gleamed that evening in the banquet hall, laden with crystal goblets and platters of blood-infused fruits that shimmered like rubies. Aaron lingered at the servant's fringe, Jory tucked behind her, the brooch winking at his throat. Nobles laughed, toasting alliances, but the air tasted wrong, acrid under the perfumes. Lady Aloan swayed first, clutching her throat, goblet shattering on marble. Foam flecked her lips, veins blackening beneath porcelain skin. Panic surged, guards shouted, but Alien was there in a blur, his hand steadying her as she convulsed. "Poison," someone hissed. Eyes turned to Aaron, the insolent healer. She pushed through, knees hitting stone beside Aloan. "Hold her," Aaron snapped at the nearest guard, already ripping herbs from her pouch, universal antidote, ground fine. The woman's pulse thrummed erratic under Aaron's fingers, skin fever-hot. She forced the paste between blue lips, massaging her throat, ignoring the stares boring into her back. "Come on," Aaron whispered, willing the herbs to work. Memories flashed, her first solo healing, a fevered child in the border grove, her hands shaking then too. Not again. Not on her watch. Aloan's spasms eased, breath rasping in. Color crept back, the hall exhaled. Alien's shadow fell over her. "You saved her." His voice was low, laced with something raw, gratitude or calculation. Aaron wiped her hands on her apron, meeting his gaze. Jory peeked from behind, brooch glinting. Anyone could have with the right mix. But eyes lingered now, courtiers murmuring, weighing her worth. Useful, yes, but visible. A target. He extended a hand, not to pull her up, but to offer a vial from his own stores, rare essence to stabilize. Their fingers brushed, electric. "Stay near," he said softly, for her ears alone. "The court sees your value now, and its dangers." She rose, pulse racing, the weight of protection settling like chains disguised as shelter. Jory slipped his hand into hers, the brooch a small anchor. But as nobles closed in with honeyed questions, Aaron felt the noose tighten, saved one, exposed all. His gaze followed her still, hunger and loneliness mirrored in her own guarded heart. Aaron slipped her hand from Jory's, the brooch's edge biting into her palm as she forced a nod at the encircling nobles. Their smiles gleamed like polished thorns, questions coiling. "How fares the prince's health under your care?" Such deft hands for a human tribute, each one probing for weakness. She murmured excuses about night-blooming herbs wilting without her touch, backing toward the garden archway, heart slamming against her ribs. Freedom tasted like the cool stone underfoot, but she felt their eyes linger, tallying her escape. Nights blurred into rhythm after that. The sylvan court's sun bowed to moonlit labors, pruning silver-leaf vines that wept sap like blood under starlight, grinding roots that numbed vampire fangs for the king's endless feasts. Aaron moved through it all with calloused hands and a healer's vigilance, her body adapting while her mind sharpened on whispers. Servants muttered of old pacts, laws etched in thorn ink that bound outsiders like her, humans, half-breeds, to crown service without end. One dusk, as she catalogued moon petals in the royal ledger, a phrase snagged her: tribute autonomy voids upon blood oath initiation. It contradicted the Border Groves treaties she'd memorized as an apprentice. No pact without consent, no binding without trial. Her fingers stilled on the page, pulse quickening. If true, she wasn't servant. She was prey, erasable ink waiting for a signature in red. She couldn't ask outright. Questions drew fangs. That night, as the court slumbered in daylight torpor, Aaron decided. The archive lay buried in the palace roots, a vault of fungal-lit scrolls guarded by dust and disuse. She'd go alone after her tasks, when shadows hid her steps. The choice settled heavy in her chest, a knot of fear and defiance, mother's abandonment echoing in the risk, that old terror of ownership twisting anew. But ignorance chained tighter than any law. Dawn bled purple when it shattered. The great hall thrummed with courtiers, their silks rustling like dry leaves. Jory stood chained at the dais, wrists raw from silver manacles, accused of shattering a noble's heirloom chalice. Petty theft, they called it, but his wide eyes screamed setup. Aaron froze at the hall's edge, basket of herbs clutched like a shield, breath catching as the whip master uncoiled his lash, 9 tails barbed with crystal. Then Alien descended the throne in a swirl of black velvet, his presence a chill wind that silenced the murmurs. Tall, unyielding, his silver hair bound in a warrior's braid, eyes like shattered moonlight fixed on Jory. Competence radiated from him, king's decree absolute, no counsel needed. "Halt," he commanded, voice low thunder. The whipmaster dropped to knees, chains clattered free at Alien's gesture. Jory crumpled, rubbing wrists, gaze darting to Aaron with raw gratitude. Relief flooded her, hot and fleeting. Mercy, small but real, the king's hand sparing what politics would crush. Courtiers shifted, whispers rising like steam. But as Jory stumbled toward her, Alien's gaze pinned Aaron. He strode close, towering, his scent of ancient pine and faint coppery hunger invading her space. "You endanger my order," he said coldly, words slicing precise. "Interfering with wards invites chaos. Tend your garden's healer or join him in irons." Her throat tightened, cheeks burning under his scrutiny. The rebuke landed like a slap, mercy for Jory, scorn for her, exposing the court's knife-edge loyalties. She dipped her head, biting back the urge to snap that she'd saved the boy first, her herbs easing his tremors nights ago. "As you command, my king." His eyes narrowed, lingering a beat too long, loneliness flickering behind the ice before he turned away. Jory's hand found hers again, trembling, and she led him out, the hall's stairs carving her isolation deeper. By evening, isolation hardened. Lady Vespera, a sharp-featured courtier with venom-green eyes, cornered her in the herb alcove. "Clever pet, stirring the prince from his place," Vespera purred, trailing a nail along Aaron's ledger. "But humans bind easily. A drop of your blood, a pact to the throne, your skills eternal for the crown. No more wandering groves." Aaron's blood iced. "Laws require consent," she said, voice steady despite the quake in her gut. Vespera's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "For elves, perhaps tributes, we rewrite you." She leaned in, breath cool. "Resist and rumors fly, you seduce the hollow prince, undermine the king." Aaron stepped forward, chin lifting, the healer's pragmatism stealing her. "Speak that again and I'll brew something for your tongue." Vespera recoiled, eyes widening, but retreated with a smirk. By midnight the damage spread. Servants averted eyes, nobles hissed troublemaker as she passed. Social walls rose swift, her solitude a cage of sidelong glances, owned already without ink. She sought the old tree that night, its roots sprawling like veins in a forgotten courtyard, bark etched with faded runes. Jory waited there, as if sensing her fracture, huddled in his thin cloak. No words, he never spoke, but his shoulders unknotted at her approach. Aaron sank beside him, the earth's damp cool seeping through her skirts. "Breathe with me," she whispered, taking his hands. She taught this in the grove. Thumb to wrist pulse in for 4, hold out for 6. Grounding, pulling chaos from the blood. Jory mimicked, eyes closing, chest rising slow. His fingers, cold as river stones, warmed in hers. Minutes stretched, quiet broken only by leaf rustle. Then he traced in her palm, hurt loud asterisk. She stilled, heart aching. The silence. From pain, he nodded, etching deeper, seen then thrown, voice taken. A sliver of his wound, discarded like Jory the symbol, mute to stay invisible. Her own abandonment mirrored back, mother's sail at 12 a ghost in the lines. Tears pricked, she pulled him close, his head to her shoulder. Their bond wove tighter, fragile family in the tree's shadow, him her anchor, her his voice. Emboldened, she slipped to the archive pre-dawn, Jory's brooch tucked in her bodice for luck. The vault door yielded to a healer's trick, nightshade oil on hinges, silent swing. Fungal lanterns bloomed faint green as she delved scrolls, dust choking her throat, fingers black with age. Inconsistencies piled. Treaties promising tribute release after 7 years, crossed by amendments asterisk post-vampiric ascension asterisk. Her autonomy, a lie erasable by royal blood pact. Heart pounding, she unrolled the deepest vault, asterisk festival of thorns codex asterisk. There, plans to crown her blood anchor at the solstice rite, her veins fueling the court's unity spell. Unwilling, unbound, property eternal. Voices echoed from the stair, courtiers plotting. Aaron crouched behind shelves, breath shallow, as Vespera and another hissed. The human's blood hums pure, anchor her mid-festival before the king softens further. His mercy cracks the throne, bind her, bind him. She must expose it. Tell alien, risk their knives turning on her fully, enemies made, isolation to exile. Or silence, let the pact claim her, preserve the fragile peace with Jory with him. Her hand trembled on the scroll, mother's betrayal screaming asterisk run, but Jory's etchings and alien's haunted gaze pulled her back. Choice clawed her chest, fight for freedom, pay in blood, or yield and lose her soul. The archive's chill pressed in, decisions weight heavier than any chain. Aaron crushed the scroll in her fist, the brittle vellum cracking like dry bones under her grip. Ink smeared her palm black as she shoved it into her apron pocket, evidence of the blood-packed schemers, the council's veiled knives aimed at her throat. No more hiding. She'd tell him now, before the archive's shadows swallowed her choice whole. Her boots scraped the stone as she burst from the archive into the moonlit corridor, heart slamming against her ribs. Guards straightened at her approach, but she didn't slow, didn't flinch under their silver gazes. "The king," she demanded, voice raw. One nodded curtly, leading her through twisting halls where tapestries whispered of ancient hunts, their threads frayed like forgotten promises. They stopped at a heavy oak door in the king's private wing, unguarded for the first time she'd seen. She pushed inside alone, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and faint copper, blood, always blood. Alien stood by a narrow window back to her, his silhouette etched against the starry void. Moonlight silvered his pale hair, but his shoulders carried a weight that made the room feel smaller, heavier. He didn't turn. "You shouldn't be here unannounced, Aaron Vell." Her throat tightened, mother's ghost clawing up from memory, asterisk sold for a sack of grain and a border truce, girl, don't make it hurt worse. The council's blood claim, it's set for dawn, they think I'll bend. She pulled the crumpled scroll free, holding it out like a blade. "This proves it." Alien faced her then, eyes gleaming red in the dimness, not with hunger but something fractured raw. He took the scroll, unrolling it with hands that didn't tremble, king's hands, forged in centuries, but his jaw clenched as he read. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant hoot of a night owl beyond the glass. When he spoke, his voice was low, stripped bare. "I've ruled alone for 700 years, solitary because connection means hunger. means losing the iron grip that keeps this court from devouring itself. He set the scroll down, fingers lingering on it as if it burned. One slip, Aaron, one moment I crave more than control, and I become the monster they already whisper I am. Not king, beast. The words landed like stones in her chest. She'd seen him as unyielding marble, a throne incarnate, but now, cracks. Loneliness carved into the lines around his mouth, guilt shadowing his gaze. Not a god. A man ancient and aching who'd built walls from the bones of his own isolation. Her fear of him softened just a fraction, replaced by a pull she couldn't name: pity, kinship. She stepped closer, pulse loud in her ears. Then don't let them claim me like property. The words tumbled out, hot and unfiltered, dragging her secret with them. My mother sold me at 12. Border Grove skirmish, human debts paid in flesh. I was chattel then, apprentice rags and all. Won't be again. Not for your crown, not for peace. Her voice cracked, hands fisting at her sides. Promise me this, no blood pact, no owning. Concrete alien, swear it or I walk tonight with Jory if he'll come. His eyes locked on hers, the red fading to storm gray. For a breath the air hummed with his power, the vampire's restraint coiling tight. Then he nodded once, deliberate. I swear it, no pact binds you. But doubt flickered in his stare, cost unspoken, counsel's rebuke looming. That night sleep evaded her in the healer's alcove. Jory curled silent beside her on the pallet, his small hand clutching her sleeve. The boy twitched in dreams, half-elven frailty making his skin fever-warm. Footsteps echoed outside, guards shifting, voices murmuring orders. Her gut twisted, the search had begun early. A knock rattled the door. She bolted up, easing Jory behind the herb-drying screen, his wide eyes pleading in the dark. Stay, she mouthed, pressing a finger to her lips. The door creaked open. Lurel, the trusted servant, round-faced, silver-haired, who'd slipped her extra ration since her arrival, peered in, lantern casting jittery shadows. Aaron, council's decree, full sweep for discrepancies. The hollow prince's been seen wandering, you hiding anything? Lurel's eyes were kind, but protocol gleamed beneath. Aaron swallowed, mother's betrayal echoing. Lies by time, girl, but they fester. Jory's shallow breath scraped from behind the screen, terrified of visibility, of being dragged back to the court's symbol throne. One truth now and he'd shatter. No, Aaron lied, voice steady as she stepped forward, blocking the view. Just me and my stores. Jory's been with the king since dusk, saw him myself. The words soured on her tongue, future thorns sprouting. Lurel trusted her, and deceit could unravel that thread when she needed allies most. Lurel hesitated, lantern dipping. Council's thorough tonight. Bloodclaim whispers, she trailed off, sympathy creasing her brow. Be careful, child. The door shut, footsteps fading. Aaron sagged against it, Jory emerging to wrap thin arms around her waist, mute face buried in her skirt. Safety bought, but at what price? Lurel's doubt would spread, complications coiling like vines. Dawn bled gray through the shutters when a shadow filled her doorway again. Not guards, but alien himself, cloak swirling like smoke. Jory scrambled back, but the king knelt, slow, extending a hand palm up. No command, just patience. The boy glanced at Aaron, she nodded, throat tight. I've altered the rotations, Alien said quietly, eyes on her. No search reaches here, the blood claim. Voided by royal seal before council convened. His voice held an edge, rebuke incoming, fractures in his absolute rule. They'll rage, but you're untouched. She searched his face, the admission from last night lingering like a bruise. Loneliness mirrored her abandonment, his control fear echoing her ownership dread. Trust flickered, fragile as a healer's flame. And Jory? She asked, hand on the boy's shoulder. Alien rose, gaze softening on the mute ward. He needs you, healer, tutor. Teach him your herbs, your resilience. A pause waited. I'll keep you both safe. No claims, no snares. But accept this role, bind us, or the court tears it apart. Her pulse thrummed, hope warring with Snare's shadow. Jory's fingers tightened on hers, pulling her toward yes. Alien's stare held centuries of solitude, cracking open for this family found in the ruins of power. She could run, preserve her walls, but the boy's warmth, the king's quiet fracture, they anchored her. Yes, she whispered, the pact sealing in the dim light. Hope or trap? The court's rules sharpened deadlier now, their truths bared like fangs. But for the first time she wasn't alone in the bite. Jory etched a crude flower on her palm with his finger, thanks, trust. Alien's hand brushed hers in passing, cool and steady, a vow unspoken. The room held its breath, fragile peace trembling on the edge of dawn. Aaron knelt in the royal gardens at first light, her fingers sinking into the cool soil as she pressed crushed fever leaf against a thorn-pricked stem. Jory crouched beside her, his small hand mirroring hers, silent as always, the flower he'd traced on her palm last night still tingling like a secret brand. But the air hummed wrong, heavy with whispers from the shadowed arches, eyes on them like thorns waiting to draw blood. She straightened, wiping dirt from her skirts, and caught the flicker of movement. Servants clustering at the garden's edge, their glances sharp as shears. One broke away, a wiry elf with silver braids, his face pinched. "Healer, the High Council summons you." Now, his voice cracked like dry bark, laced with something uglier than disdain glee. Aaron's stomach twisted. The voided blood claim. It had leaked, somehow, despite Alien's decree. She glanced at Jory, who clutched her sleeve, his wide eyes pleading. "Stay here," she murmured, prying his fingers free. But as she followed the servant through the vine-wreathed corridors, the murmurs swelled. The king bends ancient law for a human pet. The crowned phrase, "Laws must bind him or us all." The council chamber loomed, its obsidian doors parting like jaws. Inside, tiered seats overflowed with courtiers, their silken robes whispering like serpents. Alien sat at the head, his throne a twist of living oak and shadow, face carved from ice, beautiful, unreadable. But his eyes met hers, a flicker of warning, then flicked away. Lord Vesperin rose first, his voice a honed blade. "Majesty," the blood claim on the human tribute was voided without right or reckoning. Rumors poison the court. The crown defies its own oaths. "Demonstrate the laws still bind you, or we fracture." Murmurs rippled, heads nodding like wind-stirred leaves. Aaron's pulse hammered. She stood rigid in the chamber's center, the weight of their stares peeling her bare. Then Lady Thorne stepped forward, clutching a crumpled cloth, the scarf from her hidden stores, the one that proved she'd concealed her monthly rags to dodge the claim. This was found in her quarters by a loyal servant. Proof of manipulation, Majesty. She schemed against sacred custom, mocking the crown's will, public penance. Strip her of herbs and station. Let her scrub the hall floors on hands and knees, bare to the court's judgment until she begs forgiveness. Gasps, then approval swelled. Aaron's throat closed. No, not that, not exposed, owned by their eyes. She trusted Alien's promise in the shadowed alcove. "Your body is yours, I swear it." But his jaw tightened, gaze distant as Vesperin pressed. "Or admit the laws are playthings, sire. The outer houses already stir." Silence stretched, thick as congealing blood. Alien's fingers drummed once on the throne arm, cool, steady, like the brush of his hand last night. Then his voice fell, flat and royal. "The healer will perform the penance. Now, bare your shoulders and knees to the stone. Cleanse the hall until dusk, under watch. Let this rebind what phrase." The words landed like fangs in her gut, betrayal, cold and absolute. Aaron's knees buckled, but she caught herself, heat flooding her face. Courtiers leaned forward, hungry. She met his eyes, searched for the fracture, the apology, but found only the king's mask, flawless. He chose them, chose power over me. The old scar tore open, her mother's voice at 12, haggling her price to border raiders. "You're chosen, girl." Useful, then discarded like spoiled root. Servants thrust a rough cloth and basin into her hands. She dropped to the stone, the chill biting through her thin shift. Fingers numb, she scrubbed, suds foaming gray under the endless eyes. Laughter lapped at her edges, soft at first, then bolder. A droplet hit her cheek, she swiped it away, tasting salt. Not here, not breaking. Hours blurred. Shoulders bared to the air, skin prickling under stares that lingered too long. Her arms burned, back arched against the grind. Whispers catalogued her, human frailty. See how she yields, but inside fury coiled tight. You swore, alien, and broke it for a throne. Dusk finally bled through the high windows. Dismissed with a flick of Vesperin's hand, Aaron staggered to her feet, cloth clutched like armor. She fled the chamber, robes hanging loose, every step a grind of humiliated bone. The gardens were empty save for Jory, curled on the bench where she'd left him, knees drawn up. He bolted upright at her approach, eyes tracing the red chafe on her knees, the disheveled hair. Reached for her and she flinched back, sharp as a slap. "Don't!" The word cracked out, harsher than she meant. His face crumpled, hand hovering. She turned away, chest heaving. "Can't. If I let him close, it'll hurt worse when they take him too." The rupture split her, love for the boy warring with the void her mother left. Always chosen, then discarded. Run now before it sticks. She snatched her healer's satchel from the soil, stuffing herbs with trembling hands. Footsteps echoed, heavy, purposeful. Alien emerged from the arches, alone, his presence sucking light from the vines. "Aaron, stay away." She didn't look up, voice a whip. "Your promise was dust." The moment they leaned in, he halted, shadows pooling at his feet. "The court would have torn us apart, Vesperin's faction. Your rule." She zipped the satchel, slung it over her shoulder. "Not us, not Jory." "I see it now." Jory whimpered behind her, scooting closer, but she sidestepped, the flower on her palm itching like a lie. Alien's hand rose, then fell. Hunger flickered in his eyes, not blood, but something rawer, centuries deep. "I failed you, but stay. Let me mend." "No." The word anchored her, even as loneliness clawed back in. Footsteps crunched again, not his. Lady Thorne glided into the garden, flanked by 2 guards, her smile a velvet trap. "The Hollow Prince returns to house custody," she announced, voice lilting. "His wardship ends. The outer faction claims their symbol, unless the king contests it publicly." Her eyes slid to Aaron, triumphant. Jory shrank against the bench, mute terror in his stare, fingers twisting the air toward Aaron. Thorne's guards advanced, chains glinting. Jory scrambled back, a choked gasp escaping, closest he'd come to sound. Aaron's heart seized. They'll parade him, discard him when the politics shift. Like me, flee. Gather her kit, slip the borders under moonless sky. Safe, alone, as always, or fight, publicly. For the boy who'd etched trust on her skin. For the king who'd cracked open her walls, then crushed them. The guards lunged. Aaron dropped the satchel, stepping between them and Jory, her voice rising raw over the garden's hush. "Touch him, and you'll bleed my herbs first." Alien tensed beside her, the air electric with his unspoken choice. Thorne laughed, low and sure. The court's fragile peace shattered like frost under boot. Aaron wrenched her hand from Jory's, the boy's fingers clinging like wilted vines before falling away. She pushed to her feet, the heavy oak chair groaning against the hall's polished stone, her healer's satchel already slung over her shoulder from the morning's herbs. "This ends now," she said, voice cutting through Thorne's fading laugh. "Send me away. It's better for him, for all of you." The words burned her throat, tasting of the dust she'd swallowed at 12 when her mother's cart rattled off without her, trading a daughter for a border truce. Better to walk out owned by no one than let the court's blood packs twist her into crown property. Jory's wide eyes tracked her, silent plea twisting deeper than any spoken cry. She couldn't heal him if staying meant dooming him to their games, pawns like her, discarded when the board shifted. Her chest tightened, old scar pulling taut. Abandonment wasn't just loss, it was the prelude to possession. Guards in silvered mail stirred at Thorne's nod, boots thudding forward to flank her path to the arched doors. Aaron stepped back, pulse hammering, the air thick with incense and the metallic tang of elven bloodlust rousing. She wouldn't fight, she'd go, vanish into the border groves where roots didn't demand oaths. Alien's hand shot out, clamping her wrist, not hard but unyielding as ancient oak. From across the table, Thorn's smile sharpened, his counselors murmuring like wind through thorns. "Your Majesty," the Lord purred, "the human tribute's debts remain unpaid." "Blood claim protocol," Alien rose, releasing Aaron but positioning his frame between her and the guards, his shadow swallowing their advance. She froze, breath shallow, close enough to feel the chill radiating from his skin, the faint tremor in his unbreathing chest. He'd watched her that morning in the royal gardens, folding cloaks and tying herb bundles with hands that shook only when Jory wasn't looking. Watched as she whispered goodbyes to the mute boy trailing her like a shadow, his own ward, the one crack in her armor she couldn't hide. Centuries of iron rule flashed through him then, a hollow reel. Lovers bent to pacts, allies bled for loyalty, his hunger leashed by decree alone. Control had carved him hollow, a king revered but untouched, every intimacy sacrificed to the throne's maw. And now this stubborn healer, with her blunt refusals and unguarded glances at Jory, threatened it all, not by rebellion but by walking away, by proving he could lose what he hadn't claimed. No more. Placating the council meant watching her go, meant Jory's quiet terror mirroring his own endless nights. Defiance it was, throne be damned. "Stand down," Alien commanded, voice low thunder rolling through the vaulted hall. The guards hesitated, eyes flicking to Thorn. Alien stepped forward, physically shoving the nearest back with a palm to scaled chestplate, the impact echoing like a felled tree. "Aaron Vel is under royal reprieve. No blood pact will bind her without consent expressed and witnessed. Challenge this, and you challenge me." Thorn's face twisted, counselors erupting in hisses, Lord Aloan slamming a fist on marble precedent. "The Sylvan law your own edicts, sire." Nobles leaned in, fangs glinting under torchlight, the air electric with outrage. Alien felt the fracture lines spidering his rule, alliances fraying like old silk. But her scent lingered on his skin, soil and vervain, a tether he'd ignored too long. Jory huddled by Aaron's skirts now, small hand fisting her hem, the boy's mute gaze a mirror to the king's buried ache. Aaron swallowed, the hall's weight pressing like damp earth after rain. She could slip away in the uproar, vanish before reprisals. But Jory's grip anchored her, his thin shoulders shaking and the words clawed up unbidden, the one she'd buried since her mother's betrayal. Withdraw and she'd leave him to their mercy just as she'd been left. No, not again. She stepped forward, pulling free of Alien's shadow, voice steady amid the din. "Blood claims aren't debts, they're theft." Gasps rippled, Thorn's eyes narrowed to slits. "You bind life to property, consent be damned. I heal your wounds, tend your gardens, but my blood. My choices. Take them without asking, and you're no better than the beasts in the underwoods." Jory knows it. He feels it every time you're trotted out like a trophy. "Send me away if you must, but change this, or your court's rot spreads." Silence crashed down, heavier than any roar. Alien's gaze bored into her, surprise flickering before resolve hardened it. Nobles shifted, fury coiling, but none dared speak over her echo. She'd never raised her voice here, never named the harm aloud. Now it hung bare, her fear transmuted, not of ownership but of silence enabling it. Hours later, in the shadowed hush of her garden alcove, moonlight silvering the dew-kissed leaves, Aaron knelt binding fresh poultices. Jory slept curled nearby on a moss pallet, his breaths even for once. Footsteps crunched gravel, Alien, alone, his crown absent, cloak mudded from the hall's chaos. She didn't rise, fingers steady on the linen. They'll plot harder now. He knelt opposite, close enough for her to see the faint lines etching his ageless face, weariness he'd never shown the court. "I know." His voice cracked, raw. "I was harsh before, pushing you into service, ignoring your boundaries. It was control, not care. Forgive me or don't. But I've ordered the scribes. No blood pact without dual consent notarized. Guards reassigned from the ward's quarters. Juries under my personal watch, no more symbols. Aaron met his eyes, the vampire chill warring with something warmer, desperate. Loneliness mirrored hers, etched in the way he glanced at the sleeping boy. "Words first," she said, tying off the bandage. "Prove it holds, and me? No orders, no claims, I stay or go by choice." He nodded slow, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "By choice." His hand hovered near hers, not touching, the space between them fragile as new frost. Jory stirred, murmuring soundlessly, an alien's gaze softened, found family teetering on the edge of ruin or root. Aaron exhaled, the old wound easing a fraction, boundaries drawn but not walls. For now, it was enough. Shouts erupted from the antechamber like splintering wood, the heavy doors crashing inward under a tide of armored courtiers. Aaron jerked upright, her hand instinctively shoving Jory behind her as steel glinted in the torchlight, blades drawn, faces twisted in righteous fury. "By the old blood law," bellowed Lord Varin, his voice a whipcrack over the clamor, eyes locked on the boy. "The Hollow Prince is crown property, unbound by your whims, majesty. Yield him, or we reclaim him in red." Her pulse hammered in her throat, the fragile piece shattering like the vial she'd clutched moments ago, nightshade extract, distilled for just this shadow of dread. Jory whimpered, soundless but vibrating against her back, his thin fingers twisting into her skirts. Aaron's mind raced. The blood law, that ancient chain, let any highborn claim a ward's vein if they proved need to the throne. They'd come for him now to bleed Alien's mercy dry, force the king's hand or his fangs. Alien rose like a storm uncoiling, his presence flooding the room, but the courtiers surged, 20, 30 strong, hardliners who'd whispered against reform since the gardens. Guards clashed at the threshold, metal ringing, a body thudding to the marble as blood sprayed hot and coppery. Danger closed in, boots stomping, and Aaron's gut twisted, not fear for herself, but the old wound ripping open, traded like chattel again, pawned for power. No, not Jory. Not them. "Hide," Alien snarled at her, fangs bared, a blur as he intercepted the front line. Varin's sword glancing off his arm, drawing black ichor that sizzled on the floor. But she saw the trap. More poured from side doors, encircling, their chant rising. Blood for the crown, law over lies. Aaron yanked the vial's cork with her teeth, bitter fumes stinging her eyes. "No," she spat, voice cutting through the din like a healer's scalpel. She wouldn't flee to the tunnels, bartered like her mother had sold her at 12 gold leaves for a border peace that crumbled anyway. Jory needed her here, eyes wide with that terror of being seen then discarded. She smashed the vial at their feet, grinding the shards under heel. Nightshade smoke billowed, thick and choking, laced with wolfsbane distillate. Her border grove secret, tuned to cramp vampire veins, dull their senses without killing. Courtiers coughed, staggering, claws retracting as their hunger twisted inward. "Aaron," Alien's voice cracked through the haze mid-strike, his gaze flicking to her in raw alarm. She grabbed Jory's hand, pulling him toward the dais' edge, away from the melee where fists and hilts flew. "Stay close," she whispered, though he couldn't answer, his nod frantic, trusting her like roots seeking light. Smoke curled around them, a veil, but Varin pushed through, red-eyed, lunging for the boy. Aaron thrust forward a pouch from her belt, feverfew ash, explosive under pressure, hurling it square at his chest. It burst in a flash of acrid burn, searing his face. He howled, reeling back. The grand hall convulsed now, full court spilling in from balconies and arches, nobles gasping, lesser guards torn between loyalties. A blade nicked Aaron's arm, warm blood trickling, but she didn't flinch, positioning Jory behind a fallen banner, her body shield. Pain sharpened her. This was no abstract politics. These were the ones who'd eye her veins next, tribute human turned thrall. But she'd orchestrate her stand, her herbs their counter, consent her blade. "Enough!" Her cry pierced the chaos raw from her chest. She stepped onto the dais, smoke wreathing her like a specter, Jory peeking from cover. Faces turned hundreds now, the air thick with sweat and fierce sweat. You want blood law? Witness this, I offer myself, not as property, as choice. Her voice held steady despite the quake in her knees. The old abandonment clawed up, mother's cold grip shoving her into a cart, but she crushed it. Test me, bind me if he consents. She nodded to Jory, who shook his head violently, eyes pleading no. See, choice. Varin laughed, hacking through smoke, but faltered as Alien appeared at her side, bloodied, regal, a fallen courtier at his feet. The king's chest heaved, not from wounds that knit before her eyes, but something deeper, centuries of isolation cracking under her defiance. His hand brushed her elbow, light, questioning, and she didn't pull away. Jory crept forward, clutching her leg, the three of them a knot amid the storm. Alien's voice boomed then, amplified by ancient magic in the hall's stones, silencing clashes. Hear me? He raised empty hands, sword discarded, a gesture no one had seen in ages. Courtiers froze, even rebels. The blood law ends, no automatic claims, no ward seized without consent expressed. Gasps rippled. Varin snarled, rallying half a dozen with drawn steel. I relinquish it, the royal privilege of unspoken oaths. Choice binds us now, or nothing does. Her breath caught. He was gutting his power, absolute rule traded for this. Loneliness etched his face, guilt over lost intimacies, but his eyes met hers, desperate, alive, for them. Jory's fingers tightened on her thigh, a silent anchor. Revolt splintered. Varin charged, screaming traitor king. His faction lunging, 5 blades flashing. Alien met them bare-handed, speed a whirlwind, disarming 2 before a hilt cracked his ribs. Aaron shoved Jory down, flinging another ash pouch. It blinded a third, who slashed wild. Chaos peaked, loyalists surged to defend, bodies piling, the marble slick. But momentum shifted, whispers spread, he yields for them, and more guards turned, pinning rebels. Varin fell last, knee shattered by Alien's boot, dragged away howling curses. Silence crashed down, broken only by moans and drips. The court stared, shaken, divided. Some knelt, murmuring acceptance, others glared, plotting in shadows, but the tide held. Alien straightened, ichor drying, and knelt before Jory, king to child. Your guardianship, he said softly, voice carrying. By your consent. Jory blinked, then nodded, deliberate, signing messy gestures. Stay, family. Aaron's throat tightened, the boy's terror eased, visible in his unclenched fists. The king rose, drawing them close, Aaron on one side, Jory between. Witness, he declared to the hall. This found family, bound not by law but will, Aaron Vel, healer of the groves. Jory, hollow prince no more, and I, Alien Thar, their shield. Murmurs swelled, approval from edges, resentment from core, but no fresh blades rose. Aaron exhaled, arm throbbing, the smoke fading to reveal wreckage. Overturned braziers, blood pools, faces pale with change. Later in the quieted solar, doors barred, guards loyal without they faced each other. Jory dozed on cushions, bandaged by her hands, his breathing even for the first time in hours. Alien sat across, shadows under his eyes, the weight of concession heavy. You didn't have to stay, he said, voice low, tracing a scar on his palm, old from hunger's long chained. Aaron met his gaze, her wound bandaged but pulsing reminder. Neither did you. Give up the throne's teeth for us. Independence warred with the pull, his near touch earlier electric, but she wouldn't melt, boundaries first. This partnership, shared power, my herbs, your decrees, no owning, no hiding me away. He nodded, jaw tight, agreed. Imperfect, we'll fight, withdraw, but promises, your freedom always. Jory's safety chosen, my hunger. His fangs ghosted his lip. Controlled by us. She extended her hand, palm up, vulnerable but deliberate, publicly ratified, tomorrow before them all. His fingers closed over hers, cool and sure, the space between no longer frost but bridge. Jory stirred, signing sleepily, home. Aaron's chest warmed, old abandonment scarring over, not gone but shared. Fragile, hopeful, chosen. Outside, the palace hummed with uneasy peace, reforms dawning, court fracturing but holding. What they'd lost, old certainties, blood's easy chains. What remained, roots taking hold, power bent to mercy. For now it held.